Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going through this article from Jacob Wolf about how the Overwatch League shutdown vote is underway as Activision Blizzard prepares for the esports' future. This article came out last week during BlizzCon, so lots of really big things to talk about here. A lot of things kind of about the future of the Overwatch Esports. And a lot of connections, honestly, to things involving the World Cup. So I'm going to kind of bring those together and talk a bit about both of those as we go forward into this video. There's a lot of things to digest and talk about here. So let's just dive in and let's talk about it. If you want to follow along this article, it will be linked in the description so you can read it for yourself and give all the love in the world to Jacob Wolf. He is doing great work for the esports scene here with his reporting. But as he says here, the most expensive esports league ever produced will soon be officially dead. Staff at Activision Blizzard are preparing to contract with the Saudi Arabian state-owned ESL Faceit Group to run the 2024 Overwatch season, effectively dissolving the existing Overwatch League. Sources familiar with those discussions told the Jacob Wolf report. Now, ESL Faceit Group, if you know anything about esports, you know they are very involved in many esports. I think they are most well known, at least for my understanding. What I know them from mostly is they were very big on things involving Counter-Strike. They're one of the big kind of Counter-Strike leagues. They've done a lot of things with that. They also own DreamHack, more recently, which has been a big event in years past. So a lot of things to really like. The ESL is a very big group. They're a very big brand in esports. You're talking about arguably the biggest brand in esports right now. And has been doing it pretty well. I don't remember when they became Saudi Arabian state-owned. My understanding is that was not always the case, but it has happened. I want to say within the past 5 years, but I could be wrong about that. The article continues, the plans come in anticipation of a vote among Overwatch League team owners to discontinue the city-based franchise format the league has operated under for the past 6 years. Sources at both the publisher and the participating esports organizations said, in early October, Activision Blizzard Esports leadership presented a path-forward plan to the 20 Overwatch League franchises, followed by paperwork to cast their vote for or against the continuation of the league. Activision Blizzard is still awaiting final word from each organization, but it is expecting that vote will return with the majority of teams voting to discontinue the league. I think the interesting thing here that I will say is that he specifically mentions all 20 Overwatch League franchises. Now, that could be the kind of thing that he is just saying it because it's, he may not have been as in tune with the Chengdu Hunter situation. I don't know. Chengdu has been a little more active on Twitter again recently. I interpret that as them probably preparing to kind of have that final post about the Overwatch League. So they're basically just kind of preparing to go, hey, let's talk about how things are changing and how things are kind of going. And I think it's not really a surprise, especially involving the Chinese franchises. I thought all 4 of the Chinese teams were going to be done after this year. There was no reason to really expect them to continue, considering the game is still currently not available in China. It's part of why I think the World Cup was such a bittersweet tournament. I personally really wanted to see China win the grand finals this year because it may be the last time we see Gushui, Shai, Leave, Monk, Langsa on the global stage, because, or at least for Overwatch, because the game's not a thing in China. You can't play it in China. There's reports already that Leave and Shai are going to be leaving to go to Valorant with the Bilibili Valorant franchise. So it was that kind of bittersweet moment of these are really good players and you want to see them win something before they go, potentially, and seeing them lose and seeing that that's potentially the last time we are ever going to see these players play. Yeah, it stinks. And you definitely would want to see players that great, all-time great talents walk away with a win. But It was not meant to be this time around, and it was Saudi Arabia that ended up walking away with the win in the World Cup. And it's funny because it almost feels kind of like a poetic ending to the World Cup of a true changing of the guard. South Korea didn't win it. China fell down in the grand finals to Saudi Arabia in a way that almost feels like a handoff from one to another, right? Of the kind of regions that have been really important to the esport, that have been honestly kind of underrepresented in the highest level in terms of the talent, right? Outside of the Chinese-owned Overwatch League teams, 0 Chinese players have been in the Overwatch League, right? No Chinese players have played on a team based out of Korea, North America, or Europe. None. And there's only been 2 Saudi Arabian players in the Overwatch League at all. And we just saw those 2 teams compete in the grand finals of the Overwatch World Cup. So it almost feels like there's a very real kind of handover, in a sense of, these are 2 countries and 2 regions where the game was always a really big game, where the talent pool is pretty good. There's a lot of really high-end talent, some really great players there. And the idea that they're not good or that they have no future is kind of a problem. But China, at this point in time, really doesn't have much of a future until the game becomes available there again. And I think Saudi Arabia right now seems to be in the best position to take over that kind of open spot, right? I think it helps develop Europe more as a scene because it kind of injects some very high-end talent in Europe, even if a lot of the Saudi Arabian players choose to play on Saudi Arabian teams. The higher-end talent in Europe is going to force other players to get better, and then also will result in potentially players from Saudi Arabian teams signing with some of those other teams if other organizations start putting more money into it in Europe. But it seems right now like outside of Korea and Saudi Arabia and maybe the US to a lesser degree, those are really the only countries that are putting any real money or talent into the esport right now at a high level and providing them with the resources you need to do well. USA doesn't produce the greatest talent, but they do put a lot of resources into things. They usually just are one of the regions that they'll import talent from other places and they'll put them in, and they'll have, generally speaking, more money and resources than a lot of your other countries around the world when it comes to esports. So it's an interesting discussion, interesting thing to talk about, just kind of how everything is really up in the air. And it's not just like we can go, but we still know South Korea is the best in the world because they just lost the World Cup. And so there's no real guarantee that we know where things are going from here. And so the shift from the Overwatch League to an ESL Face It Run League will be interesting to see what happens. But enough of a little ramble. Let's continue the article. Next, Jacob Wolf says, if the vote comes back as expected, the game developer will pay the teams back a collective $120 million in compensation, $6 million each, after the team spent more than $7.5 million apiece in franchise fees and millions more in operating costs since 2017. Many of the franchises owned by traditional sports owners are expected to leave esports entirely, while some will remain active participants in an undecided future of the Overwatch Esports ecosystem. Bye-bye the guard. But beyond that, we'll see kind of what happens. He says here, to kind of close out this first part of the article, plans for the new look Overwatch League are still up in the air, but it's likely that it will be an open circuit system similar to what existed prior to the formation of the franchise league in 2018. Activision Blizzard sought proposals for who will run that new system over the past few months, and the ESL Face It group, backed with an unmatched level of resources in the current grim state of the esports industry, will likely emerge the victor based on current discussions. Esports Engine, an American-based event and broadcast production company that ESL Face It Group acquired in March, already handles some operation and all broadcast responsibilities for the Overwatch League sister league, the Call of Duty League. They also, as far as I'm aware, did work for the Overwatch League. The studio that they used for the desk, as far as I'm aware, that was all Esports Engine running that. Negotiations between the ESL Face It Group and Activision Blizzard began prior to the call for the vote between existing Overwatch League franchise owners, highlighting internal doubt if the team would the teams would vote to continue on. So that I did talk about a bit in a previous video, that there were discussions between the Overwatch League with both ESL Faceit and WDG for how to continue the Overwatch Esports ecosystem. WDG, of course, ran the operation in the Eastern region. Esports Engine, owned by ESL Faceit Group, ran the operation in the Western region. So most likely those partnerships that they developed over the past year will continue forward as the esport evolves, and we see kind of the new future for the Overwatch esports ecosystem. There's still more to the article, but I figured this is kind of a good spot to take another little kind of break and talk a bit about what all of this really entails. Because I think what we're seeing here is that we know the esport is going to change. We know there's going to be a lot of changes going forward. And I think there's a lot of concern for where it might go when you kind of put it out. But I think that when you look at the overall kind of ecosystem of esports in general, having that kind of more open system that isn't locked in, where you don't have the massive amounts of money being thrown behind these teams that bought in at the very beginning and bought in at the top, and kind of this massive amount of competing for a few number of spots, as opposed to being able to just form a team with your friends and try to get somewhere with it, I think there's a lot of concern for how the lack of decentralization, or the lack of centralization, I should say, will hurt the esport. But I think just the fact that it's going to be open and teams, you don't have to be on the very specific, mega corporation owned team to be able to compete in these tournaments. You can play on a team with some people that from ladder, some people that you get together, and you form a team and you play and you play and you play. Maybe you make it through open division into contenders, and then from contenders into the bigger tournaments. So there's a lot of options there that I think are really positive. It's just a matter of where things go as we get to that point. Now, this part of the article is really where he kind of Jigawolf goes into the kind of recap of everything that has been happening. If you are curious about anything, this is really kind of where he goes in here, and just generally speaking talks about how things have gotten to this point with the Overwatch League. Talking about this part here, where he talks about the teams collectively negotiating with the league by hiring the British sports law firm Sheridan's. Talks about how all the talent had that farewell thing, which still hurts just in general. There was the Overwatch League Twitter post that they had, the layoffs, and so. What I will say is, this I think is an interesting bit that he added into this article that I think is very important to note. While some in esports were hopeful that Activision Blizzard's new owner Microsoft might reinvest in the industry, that seems unlikely. Historically, Microsoft remained fairly hands-off with the esports scene for Halo, and instead delegated organizing responsibilities to companies like Esports Engine and its spiritual predecessor MLG. So it seems unlikely that Microsoft is going to come in and all of a sudden go, we want all of the money in the world going towards the Overwatch League. We want to save it. We want to salvage it. We're going to make it amazing. We're going to make it an incredible thing again. No, it's most likely going to be, no, we're just going to let people who know what they're doing handle this more. And we're not going to really touch it too much. And I think that does, for me at least, kind of show that the future is going to be very much in a direction that is maybe foreign to people who got into esports through the Overwatch League like myself. But I have enough experience with now stuff like Valorant and Counter-Strike and League of Legends to kind of know that isn't the end-all be-all of the Overwatch League and Overwatch Esports. It existed before the Overwatch League, and it will continue to exist after, just in a very different format, potentially something similar to what we saw in the Eastern region this past year, where you might have some partnership teams still, maybe some of the teams that stick in the league, teams like your Toronto Defiance seemingly will stick around, or whoever, the Shock, if they stick around. Maybe some of those partner teams will stay and remain as partner teams, and they'll have auto spots in some of these tournaments, but most likely it's going to be an open ecosystem. The league is going to be dissolved, and things are going to go to a more, here's your money type of thing. You get your $6 million back, and we're going to plan a future around other ways to build the esport. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this story develops and how it unfolds. I'm curious to see what we hear from the Overwatch League. You know, we've seen a lot of stuff from some of the teams, a bunch of players getting released, you know, staff getting released, a lot of teams, or at least some of the teams, basically saying we're done, like the Hangzhou Spark going like, yeah, we're shutting the doors for now. But that makes sense, like I said, considering the situation in China and the fact that the game isn't even playable there. It does make sense that they wouldn't be jumping at the bit to all of a sudden kind of bring all of the esports side of things back. So that's really, for me, kind of the main thing with this article. And I wanted to just talk about it and talk about kind of how I think it shows a change for the future of Overwatch Esports. And I'm a big lover of the Overwatch League. I will never sit here and rag on it and trash on it for long periods of time. I think it was a phenomenal esports league. It may have not been a financial success, but to me, as someone who watched it every single season, I have made so many memories from it. Yeah, I've gotten similar memories from the World Cup, but to me, nothing will compare to what the Overwatch League was for me as a person. And so, yeah, it'll be an adjustment to get used to the esports scene changing, but I don't think it's over. I don't think it's doomed. And I think the World Cup was potentially kind of the perfect sign of that, because the old guard didn't win, right? And I think there's two ways to look at it. One of which is, yeah, like the country that has been producing the best talent in the world doesn't care anymore. They're not that good anymore. That means that we're going to get worse talent and blah, blah, blah. I view it as South Korea's dominance is over because other parts of the world, we're seeing how good they are, right? And if we open up the ecosystem, there's more opportunity for players from Saudi Arabia or other parts of the Middle East or from South America or from, lesser regions in Europe or lesser regions in Asia to, find those talent, find players who do that. That's usually been the kind of bright spot of the World Cup, is that really good players would often rise through the World Cup because they were given a chance to play on the big stage, and that got eyes on them. Then all of a sudden they start getting picked up by other teams and picked up for Overwatch League trials, and that's when people start to go, oh, this guy's actually really, really good. We just wouldn't have known because he wasn't playing on one of the big contenders teams. He wasn't playing in the main regions and the big scene, but now here's a player who we got to see firsthand play in a tournament against some of the best players in the world and was impressive, and that gives them a shot for something bigger. I think opening up the ecosystem is going to lead to stuff like that as well. We're going to see players from all over the world now once again truly getting representation. I look specifically at South America, Central America. I mean, the game is dead there on an esports level, right? They don't do anything to promote it. But we saw that game between Colombia and Mexico in the World Cup. Sure, neither of those teams did particularly well in Group A, but that game was fun. There was love and energy, and there was just a clear excitement about that game, and those teams really wanting to win and potentially get a spot in the World Cup, group stages, or not in the group stages, in the knockout round. Like, they knew that it was a long shot, but they still tried, and they still competed, and they still did what they could to make their country proud. And those are players now that, yeah, I wouldn't have been aware of some of those players if not for the World Cup, right? Like, it just wouldn't have been a thing, because how would I know about these players when there aren't tournaments for them to compete in? They're not giving them the opportunity to play on the global stage. You're telling me you would have known about Super Gomez or Eternal or Mixv or Hug if not for that tournament, I certainly wouldn't have. And so I think it's a big deal to kind of have a tournament like the World Cup that does highlight some of that talent that has been underrepresented in the Overwatch League scene for so many, many years. Now, we are getting even more with the opening up of the ecosystem and saying, yeah, we're going to just give players from all over the world more opportunities to compete at the highest level. And I like that. I kind of like the way that Valorant has done things. It's not perfect, but they very much started with, we're going to let teams invest the way they want to invest, and then as it builds up, then we can kind of go in a partnership route where instead of it being like you buy in, we basically give you money, we use it as a marketing thing, and you kind of have a team, and we give you money to do like content shoots and stuff like that. You help us basically promote the game. We're going to pay you to promote the game, and we're going to pay you out with money, and I think more crowdfunding is a positive if that's a route we go. We saw it with the World Cup, and I'm hoping that the people who did the World Cup can kind of push for more of that as we go forward. So it's an interesting article, right? It's an interesting state to be in. There's a lot of positives, a lot of negatives, good things, bad things, all over the place. It is very, very interesting to see where things go from here. So let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on anything with this article, where you think I am onto something, where you think I'm off the goop, whatever it is. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. I love having discussions. These are the types of articles and stories that are never the happiest, most cheerful things in the world, but I do like talking about them because it is important to kind of talk about the future of the esport, right? And the future of the game that we love to play, right? Where the dichotomy of the fact that I think that the Overwatch 2 BlizzCon stuff, the in-game stuff that we saw, to me, it's like we're in a place where there's so much excitement. We have so much like concrete stuff that we never have. You know, we basically have an idea of where Overwatch 2 is going to be a year from now. We know, 2 of the next 3 heroes for 2024. We kind of got a tease for another one. We know at least one of them, or at least 2 of the maps that are coming in 2024. Like all of this stuff that we've been given for the game side. And then for esports, it's like, yeah, we don't know anything. Like all the players don't know if there is going to be an esport in a year. They don't know what the situation is going to be, anything like that. And it's just this odd dichotomy where when you think back to 2020 and 2021, where Overwatch as a game was getting nothing. It was dead. It was gone. There was basically, it was the shambling corpse of this game. And the Overwatch League was kicking and screaming and trying to drag the life of this game along. And now we're at a point where the game is in a good position where it seems like the esport can kind of be reworked into something new, and it doesn't feel like it's going to be the death of Overwatch as a game if the esport is no longer front and center all the time, right? It stinks that we're going to have this change, and it stinks that the thing that they built up is not as successful as they wanted it to be, and the thing that we all kind of have loved over the past few years is not really a thing anymore. But at the very least, we can sit here comfortably knowing that there is a future and that they have at least discussions and plans in place as we go into next year. So who knows when things are going to happen? We'll wait and see. And when, of course, we get more news, I will talk about it. But that is going to be all for me for today. Like I said, anything you want to talk about this in the comments down below, let me know. There's so much more that I could have touched on and I didn't get to with this. I think there are lots of valid concerns about these stories, specifically involving ESL Faceit. I don't know enough about ESL Faceit to really feel like I can comfortably speak on some of those concerns, but I certainly think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm hopeful that what we get is a better esport. I'm hopeful that what we get is a more expansive and welcoming community as we continue to kind of grow the game and the esport in the future. But only time will tell at this point in time. And I think it's more important than ever that we all kind of step up and play a part in kind of helping this esport become the best it can be. But that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. Your support is always greatly appreciated. That's going to be all from me for today. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time. Bye bye.